Okay, so we have Ansible control node. It can we are saying that yes, this will be used for configuration automation, configuration management automation. So it has to, it can connect, and we said that it can talk to Windows systems, Linux systems, network devices, Linux/Mac OS. Right, pretty much wherever any remote system where it can connect using certain techniques and then do it. Now, how it works in Windows is it uses, for connecting to Windows, it uses something called as WinRM, Windows Remote Management. Okay. On Linux and these systems, it uses plain old SSH. And network devices also, it uses SSH. This is primarily to connect, but what happens after connecting, right? Ansible uses Windows WinRM setup or protocol, whatever it is, to connect and reach the Windows system. After reaching, what does it do? We said this uses tasks called as modules, which are nothing but Python programs. So either it needs Python on this, or what it does is it uses the local PowerShell, which is available locally. It goes ahead and uses it. So the combination of WinRM and PowerShell, it achieves automation on Windows system. Here it uses plain old SSH, because here it uses SSH and Python. Now that's possible because on Linux and Mac OS systems, you can have Python installed. So it connects via SSH and then it uses Python to run these Ansible modules, which are nothing but Python scripts. On this, it connects via using WinRM. Then it runs Python probably locally and then takes the output of that and goes and executes on the PowerShell. And on the network devices, how it happens is it connects to the network devices via SSH, and it uses a connection mode mechanism called as network underscore CLI, because ultimately the commands, right? If Ansible is sending Python scripts, the network device may or may not understand the Python scripts, right? Because though nowadays most of the network devices are coming with onboard Python, still not many devices. There are a lot of devices which may or may not come with Python, right? So we should not assume. So what they have done is, okay, connect to the device via SSH and then use network CLI mode. What this network CLI mode does is it ensures that the script, the task or the module is executed locally. The outcome of that script execution is carried over via SSH onto the network device and gets executed in the form of network commands using the network CLI. Okay, that is how Ansible can automate all different types of systems using different connection mechanisms, different execution mechanisms. Okay, connects to remote systems, servers, network devices, etc. Typically via SSH. We said typically via SSH because that's the most common way of connecting, right? Windows automation is not very easy. It's not that straightforward, and network is anyway pretty much standardized, so there are a lot of help available. But more popular is Linux administration. Ansible kind of scores well on the Linux automation. But yes, it's being used increasingly in the networking world as well because of one of its key features, as we are going to see shortly. Okay, if the target machine has Python installed, it pushes small programs called as modules to execute the instructions which are written in YAML. So I need to reword this. Basically, we give the instructions to Ansible by writing a YAML file. Right? YAML files contains all the specification, which all hosts need to be managed, and what are the tasks to be performed on different tasks. Then each of those tasks are nothing but the modules, the Python files, which get copied onto the devices and get executed, and after the execution they are deleted, leaving the system clean. Right? That is the case where the target system has Python installed. But what if it does not have Python installed? As we already discussed, if the target machine does not have Python installed, it executes the modules remotely, which means locally on the system where Python is installed, and it carries out the automation task by using the local tools like your network CLI and PowerShell in case of Windows and network devices. Well, not really. YAML, yes, I mean, when you want to write scripts, right, which we call in Ansible terminology as playbooks, right? Playbooks are written in YAML format. Maybe you're getting confused with the YANG model, right? YAML is a kind of config language, you can say, a language or a specification for writing config files. Yeah, so the scripts are written in Ansible scripts are written in YAML. But without YAML also, we can still use Ansible by directly executing ad hoc commands directly from the command line. Okay. So Ansible terminology, typically you'll be hearing these terms when we talk about Ansible. Control node, right? The machine where Ansible is running and from where we'll be running Ansible commands, right? That is this guy here. Manage nodes, also known as hosts. These are the target devices which we are trying to manage, right? It's these guys here. Then inventory. Inventory is nothing but a list of all the managed hosts which is maintained in the form of a file on the control node. So on the control node, we create a file, put the details of all the hosts which we are managing in that. That becomes our inventory. Now this inventory can be specified in a file format called as INI, initialization file format, which is nothing but a simple, there's no specific syntax as such. You just dump some lines of text into it that can become your INI format. Or you can also specify create your inventory as a YAML format, YAML document. And internally, it takes this INI file or YAML document, converts it into JSON, and uses it inside internally. Okay, this is the diagram which we have already seen. We have a control node. By the way, the control node on which Ansible is installed should be a Linux or Linux-like flavor. Okay? Because Ansible is not supported on Windows or network platforms. So host or the control node where Ansible is installed should be Linux. Managed nodes, as we have seen, can be anything. And this inventory we maintain on the control node in the form of an INI file. And we write the scripts, Ansible scripts or collection of Ansible commands in the form of a YAML module. YAML file. Okay, so this is our let's say control node. What all we'll have on the control node is we have Ansible which is installed. Now we have a config file which contains a lot of settings which control the behavior of Ansible, and most of these settings are given default values. So even if you go with a blank Ansible.cfg file, still for most of the properties, the default values will be considered and executed. And inventory, we have seen playbook, which contains instructions. In playbook, we'll have the core piece of playbook is the tasks that need to be performed, and those tasks are nothing but Python modules, which are nothing but Python files which are sitting here. And we call this Ansible as agentless, which means on the remote systems, you don't need to install anything related to Ansible, like a piece of small client or a small agent which will perform tasks on the behalf of the control node. Now, this is the point where Ansible scores over the other similar tools like Chef, Puppet, Salt, etc. Because first thing is it's open source, and the second thing is it is agentless, right? Because on the network devices, you cannot have your agent installed, right? Agent means some other software, some other piece of software which acts on behalf of these config management tools. You cannot install them, right? So agentless architecture is the best suited for network automation, network config management. Okay. And this is your Ansible on the control node. And from our networking point of view, these are our managed nodes, could be different switches, routers, etc. It connects to them via different protocols, right? There are different protocols which are supported, but primarily we rely on SSH, right? So it can it uses SSH, it uses netconf, REST, SNMP, APIs, etc. So how to install Ansible? If you are using CWS, Ansible is very much, it's already pretty much present there, but you may not be able to find it. I'll just show you that as soon as we start up at CWS, we are given a set of instructions. So there's an instruction how to activate the so-called Python's virtual environment, which contains Ansible installed in it. Okay. To get started, when we install Ansible, by default, there's a config file which gets generated. in the default folder, which happens to be /etc/ansible. Inside that, there will be a file called as ansible.cng. There's like a template file which gets created when we install Ansible. Right. So this is the way we can put configuration settings. Now, either we can go with the default config file, default host file, which get created in etc Ansible folder, but that's not recommended because you don't want to keep modifying the files depending on the client that you're working for, depending on the project that you're doing. Right? Project 1 uses, let's say, one set of config settings and one set of inventory. Project 2 uses different set of config settings, different inventory. Right? So if you have to work with single Ansible config host file with the central location, we'll have to keep renaming. Okay, this is old, this is new, this is old, this is new. And instead, what Ansible recommends doing it is create multiple project directories, one for project 1, one for project 2, and so on, whichever you will be working on it. And inside each of those project directories, create its own config file by pointing to its own inventory. So project 1 is kind of isolated with its own host file and config file. Project 2 is also isolated along with its own host file and config file. Right. Now, in this host files, we can just maintain the host that will be automatic as part of, let's say, project 1. And same way for project. So let's I've never seen XML being used, but I don't think it supports. Okay, let's start the things. Okay. This is my CWS. Right? So as soon as you connect, you get this kind of message. So we have seen this by default. Here, something called as main comes up, which we said that yes, there are different virtual environments which are like logical VMs running inside this, like kind of separating space, development space from one another. So Python allows us to do that. We can create multiple virtual environments and get into the virtual environment and then install different versions of Python or different versions of Python libraries on them and work with them depending on the client's necessity. So that was main, and here you see here they have spoken about what are the different virtual environments that they have provided. So venv is main, tilde is home directory. Inside the home directory, there's a folder called venvs. Then inside that there's a main, which contains the main virtual environment related files. Same way we have virtual environments for Ansible and Yangsuit. We are interested in Ansible. Now, how can we quickly switch back and forth between these virtual environments? They have gone that extra mile to create these 3 scripts. I just call the script. I am in the desired this thing. So right now I'm in main. So I'll execute this command. Ansible. Activating Ansible Python environment, and I'm inside Ansible. You want to go back env main. I'm back in main virtual environment. So some of the stuff, the Python related stuff which are installed here will not be visible to this. What is installed here will not be visible to this. Right? Let's check that. I'm in the main virtual environment. Let me see if Python Ansible can be identified by checking Ansible --. Version. It says there's no module named as Ansible, which means it's not able to find. It is thinking it is not installed. Now let's switch to Ansible virtual environment and run the same command. And we get Ansible. We get the message that yes, Ansible is indeed installed here. Yeah. So we are. Okay. So there are a lot of settings mentioned in safety file, but as I said, whatever we want, we'll be customizing only that. We'll not be touching all the other settings. Now, for us to get started off with things, we need to tell Ansible where is your host file located. That host file or the inventory file is the crux, and because that's what contains the list of machines which will be managed. So first we need to tell Ansible where is that located. That's what we can specify in the defaults section of the ansible.cfg file, which we have created in our work directory in say a project directory called as project one. Okay. So we need to specify inventory. So we use the keyword inventory is equal to the file name. Let's say host. Now let's go to this folder. Okay. I'm inside project. Before that, let's see. I'm in my home directory. Here I do Ansible version. Right, so it shows the version, but it is showing a bunch of other details as well. First thing is config file. It is taking etc ansible ansible.cfg and the default location default file which comes with installation. Right, these things we'll see later. Basically it is this home export VMware's Ansible lib Python 3.9 side packages. Inside this we have your the modules which we'll be using. Okay, so when we write custom modules also, we should place them inside this side packages location so that it is available as one of the commands. Yeah, so what I was saying is, if you are not in any, let's say, kind of project directory where we have placed ansible.cfg, it takes the, it is trying to read the config file from the default location. But let's say, we switch back. Here you do Ansible minus version. It shows the configuration file as in the current directory itself. Right? It takes the path till project one, which is our directory where we are in, and considers that. Okay. So there are different places where this file is looked for. First is Ansible tries to find ansible.cfg in the current folder, wherever Ansible script, Ansible commands are being executed. So on. Second thing is logged in users home directory. If it does not find in the current directory, it goes to logged in users home directory and tries to find it. If it is not there also, then it goes to the default location, etc Ansible, ansible.ch. So the advantage is we can create project-specific configuration files, project-specific host files. Okay. So we can create host file, inventory file. And we called our inventory as host, so we need to create a file with the same name. Extension is not really mandatory. Now I have a bunch of network devices, 192, 168. Let me see what we have. So my inventory can be as simple as this. Just the IP addresses of the devices I am interested in connecting. Okay. So we don't need to install because we already have. Then we created a project directory. Inside that we created ansible.cfg, and then in that we specified where is your host file located. Now we are setting out to create this host file. Right? As I said, our host file can be as simple as this IP addresses or FQDNs, fully qualified domain names. The different subnetwork, you can add it in inventory. I didn't understand. Yeah, very much. I mean, as long as there's a connectivity between your Ansible host and that other machine, doesn't matter where it is, whether it is a separate network, separate subnet. As long as this machine can SSH to the target machine, you're good. If you have a different network, then you need, which means the Ansible control node from this network cannot talk to the other network. Is that the case? In such case, you need to have another Ansible host in that network. If it is reachable, then it is fine. You don't need to do anything, right? You can just have one host, principal host, and you can manage the configuration. So it doesn't matter. Here you can have uh, your yeah, as long as you can reach these these two devices from your Ansible host, you're good. You can put them in inventory and you can work with them. Reach as in not just ping, it should be like a kind of SSH. Okay, so we can put whatever you want in this the host file. Now we can check whether we are connecting to the right host file using this command Ansible all --list hosts. Okay, let's do that in our case. This is our simple directory. Then go to terminal and say Ansible. Right, whenever you are calling the command Ansible, we need to specify which host. Right, here we are not, we are just trying to check the inventory. So there is a, right, we say all, not any specific for this thing, consider all the devices. But specifically the task that I'm asking you to do is list the inventory, list the hosts. And say minus list hyphen hosts. Where are these coming from? Green, blue, SRV1. Now it's properly complete. I'll see what was wrong with the other folder. Probably I am doing something mistake. So I'm in a currently a different location, different folder. What do I have here? Same files. Right? What do I have in Ansible config? Just this. Okay, these fonts. Let me check. What do I have it? Then it's such. If I had made any mistake here, it won't consider this. Probably that's where I would have gone wrong. Anyway, this is my this config file points to where is your host located. This is my host contents. And I have, first I have some complex stuff, but I have R1 whose IP address is this, S1 whose IP address is this. Then I have some series of statements expressed in an abbreviated form. Let's say you have, we'll come to this. Then there's a concept of grouping within this. We'll come to this as well. So the point I'm trying to make here is where is your host file located? Which host file to be considered will be decided by your config file. That's what. That is the thing. Inventory. Now this will show me Ansible all minus list hyphen host will show me whatever we have put in the host file. Now to check inventory, we have another command, inventory. You see, this Ansible is used for executing ad hoc commands, like your just single commands, right? Directly where you are putting the command on this thing. Other than that, we can check the for doing different types of things. Ansible has executables like Ansible inventory, which provides different mechanisms, a way to fetch your inventory and display. Then you want to check documentation of Ansible modules. You can use Ansible-doc. You want to execute playbooks, you have Ansible Playbook. So these are the executables. Right? So here we are using Ansible inventory. Now, since you are already saying inventory, you just need to say minus list. Okay. It is, I said like internally it takes it doesn't matter whether you specify INI file or YAML file. Ultimately, it builds a JSON tree, JSON object with all the details that you have specified. And if you notice this structure, right? Here it says something like meta, which means metadata, which means where some variables can be specified here. Then there is something called as all, right? I've been mentioning all, like when I ran that command. This all refers to this all, which is nothing but a group called as all, to which all the hosts belong. And then there is one more group called as ungrouped. Right? So by default, since I did not define any group, I have not done any grouping in my inventory, so it is assumed that all my hosts belong to ungrouped class. Now, what this grouping is all about is, let's say, most of the times you will be configuring uh, systems in batches, right? You won't be doing one at a time, or one for one server. You won't be doing it, right? Then automation doesn't make much sense. So automation is more powerful when you're doing something on huge number of devices. So in that huge number of devices, you will have different requirements, right? Like there are some devices which are routers. There are some devices which are switches. There are some devices which are firewalls. There are some Linux servers. Within Linux servers, there are some DB servers. There are some web servers. There are some whatever, right? So different types of these things are there. So configuration settings for all the routers will be stay common. For all the switches, it will be like common. So in that case, if I want to apply this configuration on all the routers, instead of specifying Ansible R1, R2, R3, R10, R100, and so on, I'll simply say, I'll create a group in my inventory called as routers, put all the routers under it. So it's like I created a group and made my routers part of that group. If I want to send some config commands from Ansible to this bunch of routers, I'll simply say Ansible routers do this. Ansible, go to the routers group, and on each host which you find under the group, do this activity. Same way, I'll have switches. Now, there could be some settings which are common for both networks and switches. Routers and switches. Right? So I can have one more third group called as network devices, for which the children will be these two groups, routers and switches. Now belong to this parent group called as network devices. So this way we can use grouping. So in that sense, all represents a group to which all the elements of the inventory by default belong. Ungrouped is if we have grouping, any hosts which are left without grouping belong to ungrouped. By default, you don't have to do anything about it. So since here in our inventory, we just put this and we have not done anything for creating grouping, by default, they are going into ungrouped. There's something like host-var, so we'll see what are the variables which are associated with it. Now, though I can do this, right, this is not very user-friendly. If I've done like this, if I have to execute any, let's say, Ansible playbook or Ansible ad hoc commands, I'll have to say Ansible, then I need to say 168.5, then I need to put some commands. So this is like cumbersome. So instead, you will give some small simple alias. It's a router 1 or router 2 and so on. Yeah. So in that point of view, we would like to give some user-friendly aliases for them. Like let's say this is R1 and this is this one. Now, if it is R1, how will I tell that what is the IP address which is corresponding? Obviously, if I simply say R1, Ansible connect to R1, it won't connect, right? It should know what is R1, etc. So we know that. So we need to tell, okay, when I refer to R1, which is the IP address it should pick up. And that is specified using a property called as Ansible underscore host. Right? We define some alias and then use this property Ansible underscore host to specify the IP address which should be considered for this sample. Same way, R2 is equal to Ansible underscore host is equal to this. Right? So what we have done is we have defined alias as R1, S1, and we have used two variables, host variables, because this is at each host level. R1 is a host. At the host level, we have some R1 is this thing. We have a variable name. We need to store some data associated with this, so we use this name. This becomes like a variable which is associated with this host. Because for someone else, R1 could have some other IP address, so these values keep changing. Now let's see, after doing this change, how our inventory shape looks. We get some data in this host variables because we defined a variable which is associated with the host that is coming here. Right? And the host was for R1, this is the variable, this is the value. For S1, this is the variable, this is the value. Right? And this is your list of hosts. Since we have not used any grouping, they still come under ungrouped and S1 R1. So now we'll also do grouping. Let's say this guy belongs to group of routers. This guy here is switches. Routers switches. Now net underscore devices, let's say. This making sense? So we created a group called as routers, grouped routers under it. Now, if I have multiple, they will come here, R2, R3, and so on. S1, S2. Right? Something like that. Okay, I've given a little more elaborate host file maybe in the example that I gave. So you'll see this kind of output. Like defining groups we have seen. Okay, so that was about how you can go about creating inventory and how you can see what is the proper inventory that you're pointing to, so you can start automating the stuff, right? But before that, there are some variables which we need to set. Right? First thing is, if I want to connect to a device called as, let's say, R1, I need to tell what is its IP address or host name, which is associated with it. That is specified using Ansible underscore host. Right. Now we said Ansible will go and try to SSH to this guy. When it is going and doing an SSH to some other system, we need to tell as which user it should connect. Right? Because SSH expects either username and password or key-based mechanism. Right? So you need to tell what is the user as which you are trying to connect. That we specify here. Right? Ansible user, so Ansible password, whatever is the password for this user. Ansible network OS, and this is another important piece because we are dealing with network devices. When we give some commands, it has to go and execute on the network device. Which means we said yes, the script itself will not be copied, but its action will be copied and go and we take and go and perform it on the network CLI. So for that, it should know what type of device is fine. Is it iOS? Is it EOS? Is it Arista? Etc. Okay, so this was our, so we can separate variables also into different this thing. Now here also I need to have Ansible underscore network underscore OS. Right. It should have been like this, but instead we can define one variable section called as class. Right. Network devices colon class. So what are all variables? First thing is we can put off this because this is repeating in all these places. We don't need it. We'll put it directly under this. Now, since we specified it once, this won't be required. And the second. Okay, this is about reaching, but after reaching, you need to use username, password, Ansible. Okay, so we have almost everything that we need. Now, if it is Linux servers, normally we have a module Python program called as ping. Right? So it tries to check the heartbeat of the system, and then if it finds it up, then it goes and gets like executes a command. Yeah. So this is the network OS type. This is the user. This is the password. Right. So now we can start playing around with something called as ad hoc commands. Ad hoc commands are like just random commands that you at the prompt. Okay. Use ad hoc commands to connect your Cisco router and execute show commands. You can use ad hoc commands to connect your router and execute show commands. Then ad hoc commands are like raw commands, right, which we can give at the command line by invoking Ansible is executable. Okay, some advantages of ad hoc commands, but it's not that advantageous. Writing script is always preferable. Okay, this current course. Right, let's say we want to execute a show command. We need to directly access the shell of the device, and then we'll be able to give the command there. So that's what we'll be trying to simulate. Ansible, we need to tell which host to connect to. Right there, all we have this. Then we need to tell which module to be used. Right? We said Python Ansible tasks are nothing but Python modules, which are nothing but files. So to pick which module we wanted to use, we'll say -n. Now here there will be different types of modules. Now Cisco guys have created some modules, Cisco iOS underscore command, iOS underscore config, which can be used for specifically show and this purposes. But we can also use modules called like raw. Raw means do not assume this Python, etc. is there. Just use this as a raw connection and send the data across. So raw takes away the control of doing the execution through this thing. It can show you. I mean, it can have unintended effects on your system. So we should try avoiding a raw module, or should be careful basically. So here we are saying raw -a stands for arguments. And now this to the raw module, I'm passing the command which I want to give as an argument. So this is as good as running this task is as good as logging into this device, accessing logging into device using shell, running this command at the shell. That is what this is going to do. Right. So in our case, it is Ansible on -m raw -a directly the command. invalid or incorrect password. It has connected to R1, executed the command, showing its output, connected to S1, executing its command, showing the output. Okay, so now you see one of the disadvantages of raw is we just executed show commands which have not modified the system as such, but all this is being shown in yellow as if right, some change has taken place. So this raw guy does not have the intelligence of figuring out whether something was changed on the target or not. Right, so now in the same place we can use another module called as CLI underscore command. But for this we need to say argument command is equal to single quotes we need to put this. Connection type. Now we were using raw. Raw is going directly on SSH, connecting to the raw shell and sending the commands as they are. But let's say we want to use another module. So there are modules like CLI command, iOS command. So Ansible on, we say CLI command is the module to be used, and the command to be given is this. Yeah, connection type. Right? Raw module takes directly connects, and then if it is a Linux device, it will use SSH. If it's a network device, it will go and wait till your SSH connectivity is established. But to but these are network devices. So if you are using any other mechanism, we need to tell use SSH, but the connection type you make it as network underscore CLI. So you'll say Ansible underscore connection will be network underscore CLI. Now this tells that do not assume that the target system has Python or not. Execute the code here itself locally and gather the commands, kind of CLI commands, and go and execute on the CLI using network CLI. Okay, it connects to S1, prints output, R1 prints output. So this is the way we can execute ad hoc commands, right? We use Ansible as the executable, say which device. Now here instead of saying all, let's say I want to connect only to S1, I can specify S1 or R1, or you want to talk to there are more, but you want to talk to only R1 and S1. You can put R1 comma S1. Okay? Like this, all the flexibility is there. Then we need to decide which is if you see, this is the crux, right? This is the one. This is the guy who is executing your commands. So using -m, we need to identify which module we'll be using to execute this. So -m CLI command. Now this CLI command will be like a Python function that needs, we need to pass some parameters to it. So those parameters, right, or arguments are denoted as -m. Right? This is about CLI command. So we need to tell what is the command using this command keyword. And command is equal to this. Then it executes. Well, this is a short form for show IP interface brief. SHIP INTBR is kind of show IP interface. Well, this is not extra. This is not extra comma, but we need to tell what is the command. So command is equal to, we need to put this in single quotes because outside we have double quotes, right? Inside we need to put single quotes. Okay. We have seen raw module, which will not bother which type of connection parameter you're trying to use. It will, as the name says, is raw. It just takes the SSH connectivity and figures out how to work with it. But it's not recommended unless typically they say a raw module is kind of should be used only. Let's say on Linux system, Python is not there, so you cannot execute anything if Python is not there. So to install Python itself properly, use raw module. That's the kind of use case. Other than that, we have this CLI command, iOS command. Then to send config commands, we have iOS_config. Okay, we'll stop here and continue after tomorrow.
Recording stopped.
Okay. Next class topic is Ansible continuation. Right, we have seen till ad hoc commands. We need to see how to write playbooks. Okay, bye.